Drive safe. Turn right. Turn left. Go straight on.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Cap with the Freightliner Cascadia 72 Sleeper RR with the DD15 engine and the 12-speed transmission. Started here in Fort Collins, Colorado. So this is we're gonna start this afternoon. And we're going to begin with San Antonio, Texas. This is going to be the easy ride from the Rocky Mountains, and this is something new. There's going to be something new, like the Mack R. This is solid. It was a lot for me. So, and let's take care of that and go for a ride.
Go straight on. Go straight on. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Finally, we are here. Ready to roll. Get ready to turn right. Turn right. Go straight on. Caution, please mind the speed limit. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Get ready to turn right. Turn right. ready to turn left. Turn left. Keep right, and then exit right.
I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the show for curious cooks and
Exit
eaters.
right.
We're talking with Alexandra Crapanzano, author of Chocolat. Let's get back to it with her.
I love a good chocolate tart. I think it's like one of the most unbeatable desserts. There's one that I was really intrigued by because it was also quite simple as you described in the book, but it sounds like it's really like about the delicacy of the texture. There's a chocolate tart you have from Frederic Anton.
Yeah.
Frederic Anton's chocolate tart. Tell us about that one.
I love that shop. I mean, it's just beautiful. So about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I realized that in all of the years that I've been taking our son to Paris, I had never taken him to the Eiffel Tower. I mean, he had passed the Eiffel Tower, but we actually, when you're kind of either have lived in a city or live in a city, it's a little bit rare to go to those tourist places. And
yeah, it's like how I don't go to the Statue of Liberty ever, but
exactly. Well,
and you grew up there, so like you grew up seeing it, so it's not a thing you'd always go to. Sure.
No, I love seeing it. I mean, I do, and it's such an important part of Paris. But I decided, wait a second, this is crazy. I've got to take him up the Eiffel Tower. And then at the same time, I learned that Frédéric Anton, who's one of the great chefs in Paris right now, had taken over the Jules Verne restaurant. And the Jules Verne had always been,
Well, that's the restaurant in the Eiffel Tower.
It's in the Eiffel Tower.
Okay.
I think it's on whatever the third or fourth floor. It's high, and he had taken it over and really kind of moved it from being a little bit of a tourist trap restaurant to being a really serious restaurant. And I thought, you know what, if we're gonna go up, let's do it the right way. And we went and we had one of the truly great meals of my life. And
nice.
Incredible meal with obviously an incredible view. But the thing that just blew me away was this chocolate tart, because it had a really silk, and it was very simple. It was just a shortbread crust and a chocolate filling, very thin, but the chocolate filling was so silky and so sensual. I asked how he made it, and what he told me was kind of shocking to me, is that he would make a small tart, about 6 or 7 inches, and he would put it into an oven that had been preheated at 350 degrees, and then he would turn the oven off as soon as the tart went in the oven and only cook it very briefly. So basically, he would cook the tart in the waning heat of a preheated oven that had been turned off. And I went home and I realized, wait a second, you can't do that with a larger tart, obviously, and nobody is making little individual tarts at home. So I tested, and what I came up with was you can actually cook an incredibly good chocolate tart at 300 degrees, and you get that incredible silky, smooth chocolate custard inside. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful recipe. It's very, very French in that it's not flourishy or it's really just about the chocolate. It's simple, but the technique is kind of exquisite behind it.
Yeah, and that
right.
I can imagine too, like in that super gentle heat, the filling doesn't overcook, doesn't get grainy, it just stays very, very soft and silky.
Exactly. And it's fantastic.
Cool.
And I think it's not more than 3/4 of an inch thick, including the crust. It's just, it's meant to be very, very simple, very elegant. You can dust on a little powdered
Caution, please
cocoa
mind
if you
speed
want. You can serve it with a little bit of creme fraiche, but really it's one of those kind of very elegant kind of black dress desserts that you don't want to do anything to. You just want to let it stand by itself. I love that recipe. I love that entire restaurant.
Well, that sounds so delicious. Thank you so much, Alexandra. I can't wait to start baking.
I am thrilled.
Alexandra Crapanzano is the author of Chocolat, Parisian Desserts and Other Delights. You can find your recipe for chocolate ganache tart with raspberries at splendidtable.org. Anna Ansari grew up in the Detroit area, but always felt a draw to faraway places, whether to her father's native Iran or to China, where she lived for a few years as a young adult. And while there, she started to ask why these faraway places felt so familiar. The delicious answer lies in her beautiful debut cookbook, Silk Roads. So hey, Anna, thanks so much for making the time today.
Hi, Francis. Thank you so much for you taking the time to speak with me. I'm really honored to have this conversation with you, so thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, okay, let's start with the basics. I think for those of us who barely remember, learning about the Silk Road in history class, can you first quickly describe what part of the world you're talking about?
So when I'm talking about the Silk Road, specifically for my book, it really is the stretch of land that sort of snakes from the coast of the Black Sea over by Georgia, over to the Caucasus, across the Caucasus to the Caspian Sea, then down into Iran, up and around through Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and then down into China via Gansu province and the Hushi corridor there. But the Silk Roads has been interpreted by many different scholars, historians, whomever, as encompassing far more and far less than those that I just mentioned. The British Museum had an exhibit last year that situated the start of the Silk Roads in Japan and the end of it in England. So there are actually a lot of sort of, there are a lot of, then like Sweden was involved, sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really this, I think more and more an imagined moniker for something that symbolizes this sort of historic trade of goods and people across overland. We're not talking about, sea journeys. There are people who talk about the sea Silk Roads, but this is specifically across Asia, through the mountains, through the steppe, through the deserts of Central Asia, part of the Middle East, and into China as we know it today.
Yeah. And how did you become so interested in these places and their cuisines?
Well, I'm from one end of these. I'm Iranian American. I grew up in Michigan, but my dad and my mom's from Michigan. She was born and raised there, but my father is Iranian. He moved to the U.S. in '64 from Iran. And I grew up eating sort of food of that end of the Silk Roads. And this is my culture. It's something I'm very, very familiar with and I love, and I'm so happy to be able to share some of those recipes in the book with everyone. But on the other end, moving to China, basically I started going to China in the 90s when I was a teenager and really became interested in Chinese history and Chinese culture, but was particularly struck in maybe the first month when I was a teenager, when I was a 17-year-old living in China, of this bowl of noodles that I ate that was super confusing to me, but also very, very comforting. And I say confusing because it was at this restaurant that had this kind of calligraphic script written in green. And, it turns out I know now that was the Arabic language. And the noodles were coated in this sort of light but very flavorful tomato sauce. It had peppers and onions in it and these little chunks of lamb. And again, now with this flavor that I now know was cumin. And I'm like, what am I eating? This is not Chinese food that I know it, but I tasted it, and it just tasted like home. And again, it's because now I know it's because of cumin, but it's also because this food, this noodle dish, was from the Uyghur people in China, who are an ethnic Turkic minority from northwestern China in what's now modern day Xinjiang province. But they have traditionally been
Let's do this.
Scattered across Central Asia, way back to when the Silk Roads were sort of very, very, very busy with traders, when the Uyghurs' ancestors, the Songdians, controlled the trade of the Silk Roads, and they're Turkic people. So it was this other end of the Silk Roads where I'm a teenager eating these noodles, being like, why am I eating this? What is this? Why does it taste like home? And then I learned over time, who these people were and why I was eating this food and how the way in which these cuisines were connected was because of this overland network of trade routes and because of the migration of peoples and flavors and food and ingredients that have traversed Central Asia from Iran to China and back again for centuries. So for me, it's like really just like it's me. And what I was like from Baku to Beijing, like this is the plane on which like I exist and I thrive, and this is my cuisine and my culture, as well as so many before and after me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love how like you have your personal history, which is like one end of the road, and then you were traveling to the other end of the road and you ate this bowl of noodles. You're like, what is this and why is it bridging these two places?
Exactly.
It's so interesting too, because actually I want to talk to you specifically about noodles. There's something about like the category of food, noodles, that is so interesting to me in this area, because I think when most people hear noodles, they think of East Asian, Southeast Asian cuisines, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai, Vietnamese, so on and so forth, right? Or they think of pasta and Italy, and we don't have to go into the Marco Polo thing, but they eat a lot of noodles in Central Asia. And I don't think that, many people know about these cuisines and know about the centrality of these noodle cultures. And you have noodle recipes in the book, and there was one I was particularly interested in called Shivet Oshi.
Shivet Oshi.
I'm probably saying it wrong, but tell us about that one. I probably am too, but we'll keep it between the two of us. Yeah.
Yes, Shivet Oshi is one of my favorite dishes, I think maybe ever. But I think one of the best things about this dish, though, is it's so visually striking. The noodles are like this intense emerald green. They are infused with dill. Like, you just go to a pasta, the pasta aisle or an Italian restaurant. Any sort of green noodle you see in the U.S. is from spinach. Maybe, I don't know, spirulina. But these are dill noodles. And dill was an herb that ended up in Central Asia from Iran, from the sort of Fertile Crescent, and it made its way over to Central Asia. And then, by the way, it just kind of stopped. So you have some dill in northern Thailand in some of the Thai cuisine, but it kind of doesn't go any further, which I find personally interesting by that.
Dill is like this mystery herb that just shows up in places, and I don't entirely know why, but I'm sure it's from ancient trade. But there's like this one very popular dish in Vietnam that is fried fish, like in turmeric, and with like a ton of dill on top. And
that is definitely because of trade. Turmeric and dill in Vietnamese food
but I'm like, how'd that get there? That's amazing. But also, like, when I think of dill, I often think of like Scandinavia, like very, very, like, totally different part of the world. But anyway, tell us about dill and this town in Uzbekistan.
So Shivet Oshi is from a western part of Uzbekistan, and that is out towards the Aral Sea, the now nearly dried up Aral Sea. This town called Khiva, Khiva, which I was just talking to someone who's like, I've traveled all over Uzbekistan, but I never made it to Khiva. And a lot of people don't make it to Khiva because it's actually quite far west. And out in Khiva, that's where you find Shivet Oshi. This is the only place in Uzbekistan that you find this dish. You try to go find it in Samarkand, you'll fail. Bukhara, fail. Tashkent, fail. You can only find this in Khiva. And I asked over and over, I asked so many people, I'm like, where did this come from? Why in Khiva do you have these dill noodles? And they were like, it's just an old dish. We've always had this. We've always had this. I'm like, that is not helping me.
And it's nowhere else.
It's nowhere else. The closest you get, and this is like really kills me, and like in the best way, is in Xi'an, in modern day Xi'an in China, there is a green noodle dish. It's green from spinach, and spinach made its way into China and across Central Asia during the Tang Dynasty and the Silk Roads as well. Came from Iran, went in, it actually came via Nepal. So some of these Silk Roads like snaked into the mountains as well. But back during the Tang Dynasty, apparently the Tang courtiers were making green noodles with pagoda leaves.
And then turn right.
Specialty, like fancy pants tree found inside the palaces.
Turn right.
And the hoi polloi of Tang China wanted to eat green noodles. So they started making these spinach noodles to approximate what the courtiers were doing. And I mean, it's not dill, but like I feel like in my mind, there's got to be some connection. Why? Because Xi'an was the sort of either terminus or starting point of the Silk Roads when they were one of their like great trading periods of strength. And all the trade routes sort of passed through Khiva. So in my brain, I'm like, I feel like maybe you will never ever know this, but the fact that there are only these 2 places that you can find these gorgeous green noodles in this whole swath of, Central and into East Asia, maybe they're connected, maybe they're not, but whatever, they're both delicious. And, like, who cares? The Xi'an noodles are usually topped with that lovely stir-fried egg and tomato. And the shivit oshi that you'll find in Kiva, and then the one that you find in my book as well, is topped with this sort of beautiful carrot and potato and paprika, sort of almost like a tomato stew, like a goulash.
And with beef, right?
And with beef. Traditionally, Central Asian nations and cuisines have been really lamb heavy, but apparently since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there's been a lot of beef, and I imagine, frankly, that has to do with a lot of trade deals as well. I don't know where the beef's coming from, but there's a lot of beef there.
Yeah. Because it's not really a grassy plain.
No, it's not, and I was quite surprised.
I love the idea of infusing the dill into the noodles, though. And
it's so fun,
that
too.
flavor is so intense, but cool and interesting. I love it.
It's cool and interesting, and it diffuses. It's the subtle dill flavor that infuses the noodles that then just sort of gets swept up in this paprika-y, tomato-y beef stew on top. It's so good. And it's just fun.
I love it. Okay, so I love that we've talked about Central Asian noodles. There's another sort of whole category of food here that is so important. It's the sweets, right? And your family's from Iran, and the tradition of Iranian sweets. But it's a little bit different culture, right? Than we have in the U.S. particularly. It's more small cookies and syrupy, intense confections than pastries and big slices of cake or they're kind of more compact, intensely flavored things, lots of nuts and flowers and stuff. But you have a recipe in your book for an almond bundt cake that you had in your family.
I do.
Tell us about that. Why it's in the book.
So, everything you're saying there about the sweets tradition is one of the reasons I'm not a massive fan of specifically of Iranian sweets that I grew up having as a child. I find I don't have a massive sweet tooth, and I found those super syrupy, intense. Even I like a piece of baklava, but I don't love a piece of it's too much for me. So when I was doing the dessert chapter, I really wanted to sort of play with a lot of the flavors that were involved in these confectionery and cake and cookie traditions, but kind of weave in some American and some British baking traditions or sweets. I have a funnel cake, It's instead of a gulab jamun or a sulbia, you've got a funnel cake dusted with rose petals. But the bundt cake, this is a cake that has been in my family, I'm 44, for 44 years at least. And it is my take on a cake that my mother made for almost every single party we had when I was growing up as a child. We were sort of part and parcel of this lovely little Iranian-American expatriate community in suburban Detroit. And my mom didn't speak a lick of Farsi or of Turkish. And back then, there were no, obviously there's no Google, but there were also no Iranian cookbooks out. They just didn't exist. So she didn't really know how to make Iranian desserts, and she would try. And I remember family friends would taste it, and my dad would taste it and be like, this is good soup, but something is missing. And she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? What do I do here? So what she did is she called upon her heritage, and she is, like I said, I think at the start of this talk, she's born and raised Michigander, but with an English and Germanic heritage. So she went to the grocery store, bought some tin of pre-made sugary almond filling, and she probably used Crisco in this cake too, who knows. But she made an almond flavored bundt cake, really drawing on that old Germanic bundt tradition that is still so popular and beloved in America and certainly in the Midwest. To make a bundt cake that sort of had that almondy flavor, these sort of chewy almond macaroons that you would get in Persian desserts.
Yeah.
And everyone loved it because they also were okay, this has the right flavor, but she's not messing with something that is ours and doing it sort of not right, which people still don't like to this day.
Sure.
So she was well, I'm making my own, and I'm going to make sure that I make something not only that is extremely delicious, but that satisfies both my knowledge as an American baker, but also satisfies the taste buds of all my guests and makes them feel comfortable as if they're eating something familiar, but they're not at all.
Yeah, and I love that. I love how the book kind of comes full circle, even though it's, the story of the book is about this place that's very far away from the U.S., far away from Michigan, but you bring it back home to where you came from. So that's such a beautiful metaphor for how the story sort of evolved. Thank you so much, Anna. It's been so fun talking with you.
Thank you so much, Francis. This has been a great chat.
Anna Ansari is author of Silk Roads, a flavor odyssey with recipes from Baku to Beijing. You can find a recipe for Shivat Oshi, Kievan green noodles with beef stew at splendidtable.org. Coming up next, home-style Asian cooking with Cassie Young. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table from APM.
Can't get enough PBS programming? PBS Passport is an added member benefit that offers exclusive streaming access to many of your favorite programs on the PBS app. Whether you're an NPR listener, a PBS watcher, or both, your ongoing donations of at least $5 per month qualify for PBS Passport. Make your gift now to start watching at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Hi, I'm Reid Hoffman.
And I'm Maria Finger.
Keep right.
And we host
And then
Possible.
exit right.
We want to know what happens if, in the future, everything breaks humanity's way.
This week, we're talking to Hannah Fry.
What does probability
Exit right.
actually mean? I'm not sure I understand the difference between 88% and 84%. Ultimately, I think you're quantifying how you feel about risk, and that makes sense at the population level. But when it comes down to you as an individual, things get very hazy.
This is Possible. Sunday night at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
The Splendid Table is supported by Seed. Seed's DS01 is a 24-strain, 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic, engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the show for curious cooks and eaters. So I need to introduce our final guest today, first with a whole bunch of disclaimers. The first is the company I work for is publishing her book. And the second is that I totally recuse myself from that whole bookmaking process because she's my little cousin. So while I first knew her as Baby Cassie, fans know her as a contestant on the Gordon Ramsay show Next Level Chef, and 4 million TikTokers know her as their first bite bestie, the bad bitch in the kitchen, Cassie Young. Her first cookbook is, in fact, called Bad Bitch in the Kitchen, but it was for me such a sweet and fun read to see so many recipes from our family brought to life with Cassie's incredibly extra style.
So hey, Cassie, I am so glad to see you.
Hi, Francis.
Okay, this is going to sound weird, but the audience will understand quickly. I remember the first time I met your mom. And we were super excited because Uncle Carlos got married and we were so excited to welcome a new person to the family. So I remember she comes over and right away, she was like immediately my favorite auntie because she was obviously the best cook in our entire family.
Yeah, and she would love to hear that. Absolutely.
Well, play this to her later, but
yeah.
And this is like before you were born, but I remember we'd have parties at our house and like when your parents would show up early, I knew it was because, oh my God, that means Aunt Betty's gonna do the cooking. Like, it is on. Like, I was so psyched. So when I saw you on TV say, well, yeah, my mom taught me how to cook, but now I'm a better cook than her, I was like, okay, okay.
A little bit of friendly competition there,
I love it. But so tell me, when did you realize you loved being in the kitchen? I don't think I ever actually knew that you loved cooking until I started watching you cook along with like your 79 million fans.
I think it was a slow development for me as well. When I was younger, since my mom was always cooking, I wanted to be really involved. Like I was a super curious kid. I remember it really started off more as a passion for baking. I think as all kids are, we're super intrigued by like cookies and all of those things. And so there was one time that my mom had a bread maker, and I remember this pivotal moment because it was something that like patience was never my virtue, and it's not really one of my mom's virtues either, which is why we only made bread in this bread maker one time. And I remember just having to wait all day for this bread. It took all day, but getting to see the end result of this long process was so exciting to me as a kid. And it was the first time that I really feel like I had to practice patience. Like there's nothing I could do to work around it. And it's so funny because I think that was one of the moments that I was like, I love being in the kitchen. But then that was my mom's moment of like, okay, we're never doing this again because it's taking all day. But as I got older, I really started to realize my love for cooking. I think when I went to school and I was no longer like living with my parents, and it was the first time that I really realized how much I missed my mom's home cooking. I definitely took it for granted, you know, when I was younger and in the house, and she was cooking every single meal. And at first when I was at school, I was like, oh yeah, the pizza's great and all the junk food is great. And then a few months in, I'm like, I really miss my mom's cooking. So that's when I started to experiment in the kitchen more, and I started realizing how much more and more I loved it. And then I moved away from home to California when I really couldn't just go visit as easily for her own cooking. That's when I really stepped it up and started playing around more. That threw into COVID, and obviously COVID was a big time for everyone in the kitchen. And then as that went on, like right after COVID is when I really started my content journey. And I just started documenting me cooking all my meals for myself. So it never started off as I'm gonna be a chef or I'm gonna show people how to cook. It was more so I'm just showing people what I'm making and what I like to do. I may not do it the right way. I may not do it the way other people do, but this is how I do it. And I was just having fun in the kitchen. And luckily for me, it caught on.
Yeah. I actually remember being at your parents' house for Thanksgiving, and you weren't there. I forget where you were. And I was asking your mom, well, how's Cassie doing? And she's like, oh, she's good. You know, she started doing like these like food videos on the internet. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. She's like, yeah, she started like 3 weeks ago. Give her follows. She could use more follows. I'm like, okay, sure. And I look you up and I'm like, wait, she started 3 weeks ago? She has 20,000 followers. And then like 15 minutes later, it was like 100,000 followers. I was like, oh my God, this is like a small city worth of people now. So actually with that, maybe let's start and talk about some of your recipes. And one I think is probably near and dear to your heart, your 30-minute beef and broccoli.
Yes, this recipe is always going to be one of my personal favorites just because it's one of the recipes that I first went extremely viral for. I think I posted it at like 9 p.m. one night after I had just woken up from a nap. And again, wasn't thinking, I'm going to post this recipe, this formal recipe. It was like waking up from a nap. I really need to just make something quick. And this is one of those things I'm just going to whip up. I posted a video, and I remember waking up the next morning and it had already been, I think, at like 3 million views. It was really insane. And now I think it's collected up to, I want to say 20 million, maybe plus. But it's still one of my favorite recipes to cook on the regular just because it's so easy. And I think why it was so popular was because it's something that people order often at Chinese restaurants, and they never knew how easy it is to make it at home. So being able to teach people that was really exciting for me.
Yeah. So actually, this is a recipe that I know how to make, actually more the restaurant version than the home version of. And in a restaurant, like, you know, you like flash fry the beef before you like actually stir fry it, and then you like flash blanch the broccoli, and you always have a big giant pot of water going, and you always have like a wok that's just for flash frying before you actually cook. It's not how you do it at home. So how do you do it and still keep it to just 30 minutes?
So for me, I do it the way my mom always taught me. Marinate the beef, which is always with cornstarch and baking soda. That's always been my mom's secret to really velvet the beef. Very quick marinade, and I do this for most of my proteins. And then I cook the beef first, remove the beef, which is something my mom has always done. And then I will steam the broccoli first in a little bit of the aromatics, add a little Shaoxing wine. I have a sauce that'll reduce down with the broccoli, add the beef back in, and that's it. And then of course you got the rice cooker going on the side. But it really is like, I feel like 30 minutes is generous. I think you can get it done in like 25. I feel like I've done 20 minutes even before. Just such a super easy weeknight meal, and I just never really get sick of it.
Yeah. What's the seasoning? So I know you marinate the beef in cornstarch and baking soda. And it helps really tenderize the beef. But like, what do you use to like season the beef? And the sauce?
The beef is simple. Really just soy sauce, grated garlic, ginger, and then the cornstarch and baking soda. This sauce is really the secret to it, and it starts with just some kind of broth. I usually use chicken broth because that's just what I always have on hand, but beef broth, of course, some more soy sauce, a little sesame oil, brown sugar that helps really caramelize the beef as well, oyster sauce, a little bit more garlic and ginger, and I believe that's it. But it's such a simple recipe, and it's always things that I have on hand. So I think it's a lot less than what people think.
Yeah, right? That with a big bowl of rice.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I want to talk about another, like moving to another chapter. Okay, so I've always wanted to go to Singapore with your family because that's where your mom grew up, and I've never been. And Singapore is obviously one of the great eating places of the world. I mean, Singaporean food is so good. Like the chili crab is like, I mean, you know,
one of my favorites.
But is there a dish that you like super extra love?
Hainanese chicken rice is always going to be one of my favorite dishes. I remember the first time I ever had it, it was life-changing. And you think it's just chicken and rice, like how special can it be? But
like
there
boiled
really
chicken.
is. Yes, it's poached chicken, and it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing by any means. And I think anytime someone sees chicken that's been poached, they're like, there's no seasoning. It looks kind of like
it just looks bland.
But it just is so special. I think what I love about the dish is nothing at all goes to waste. The broth that the chicken is slow poached in is also served on the side. Asian culture, you already know, having broth with every meal is just that's how I grew up. Like I don't drink the cold drinks with food. I need a hot broth to go with everything. So it just complements the chicken.
It's so Chinese.
It's so Chinese. It's so Cantonese, you know? But yes, the broth just complements the chicken so well. And then the rice is infused with some of the chicken fat, some more ginger and garlic, and then served on top of everything is also like a scallion ginger sauce, which I love. A little bit of sweet chili sauce as well. I feel like every culture has their own version of chicken and rice. This is probably one of the most simple ones, but it's so comforting.
But then it has like so much spark of flavor when you have like that ginger scallion sauce and like vinegary chili sauce too. Like every bite can be different if you want it to be. Like, what am I eating now? It's great. I love it.
Everyone has their own little way of eating chicken rice. So you also get some cucumbers on the side, which just adds a really nice fresh brightness, a little cilantro as well. And that is just, to your point, like every bite is a little bit different.
Yeah, you chicken rice your own way.
Yeah, chicken rice how you want to, always.
Can I tell you another recipe I was really excited to see in the book? Because, you know, I'm a lot older than you. We didn't actually grow up, like, hanging out together, and certainly not in the kitchen, right? So it was so fun for me to see these recipes in your book that, like, kind of told me a story about, you know, part of my own family. And your air fryer tasu, like the sweet, savory Chinese roast pork strips you see hanging in the window in Chinatown restaurants, like I totally remember this whole like hubbub in my family when your dad started making that. Like I remember him actually bringing over an old, like before they were even called air fryers, but it's basically what we call an air fryer today. Like it was portable. He brought it over to our house and he made this tasu, and we're like, ooh, like first of all, like, ooh, Uncle Carlos has moves now. Yeah. But we were like, wow, this is really delicious. I didn't know you could make this at home. And now to see a recipe for it, I'm like, holy cow, like that's amazing. But why don't you actually tell us how to make it, and then I can live my own nostalgia in the corner of the room.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because it really is like my dad does not cook at all. Like he does not like to cook. He doesn't want to do it. But for whatever reason, he's had this passion of making chasu, which I'm not mad at because he did get really good at it. And to your point, this was a time where air fryers weren't a thing. So he used this like glass chamber, I think is what you're talking about, that was portable.
I totally
and he would just like,
yeah.
He would like plug it in above our washing machine, and this is where he would just like air fry some chasu. It was so random. But this is, I feel like, one of the more exciting recipes in my book because, again, it's something that I don't think people will realize they're going to be able to make at home. It's such a classic when you go to these takeout restaurants, and I have those memories of having a big styrofoam box with the rice and the chasu and the sauce on the side. But it really is just all in this special glaze. So there is kind of this red fermented bean curd, which gives it its flavor as well as its color. The chashu has like that signature red color. Some people use food coloring in theirs. I kind of have that option in my cookbook if you want to go for the super aesthetic route, but it really is just so flavorful also with the cut of meat. I like to use pork butt. There's different cuts of pork that you can use for it too, but it's also glazed with some honey, and then the marinade that's used with it. There's Chinese 5-spice, which is probably one of the most distinct flavors. I think a lot of people are maybe unaware of what that tastes like until they smell it and they're like, oh, that's actually in some of my favorite dishes. But the marinade is quite simple, you know, and that honey creates this really nice charred crisp around the surface, but then the inside is so tender. And then chashu can be eaten with anything. Like, chashu was always one of my favorite things. I'm pretty sure my dad became so passionate about it because, like, that's one of the things that he really likes to eat. And I think the air fryer makes things so simple these days. And again, it's just one of those recipes I don't think people know they can just have it at home.
It's kind of like the do anything protein, right? It's delicious on its own with rice. Or like you chop it up and that's the protein in your fried rice, or that could be the protein in your fried noodle, or like cut it up and then you start it in the pan, get it hot, and then you scramble some eggs into it, and like that's its own dish.
Yeah.
Actually, since we're talking about eggs, I'm going to ask you about one more.
Oh, yes.
Years ago, I read this article about how Chinese stir-fried tomatoes and eggs is like the ultimate quick comfort food for like every Chinese family. And like it's almost so ubiquitous that like everyone knows how to make it, so no one has a written recipe for it. And I happen to not know how to make it, and I was so frustrated because I couldn't find any written recipes for it. And since then, I've like seen many more, and I love how they're all so different. And I was reading yours, and it's totally different from how I make mine. So how do you make yours?
I start off with making the tomato jam. I know some people cook their eggs separate and then make the tomato jam, but I'm kind of just all about the ease. So I like to start frying off some green onions and some garlic first, and then I'll slice down some Roma tomatoes, which my mom growing up always had in the fridge. So this, to your point, became the meal that like, oh, we don't have any groceries, we're having tomato egg for dinner. Again, there were times where I was taking it for granted, like, oh, this again. But then this became one of those meals that I really, really missed when I was out of the house.
Sure,
anyways,
yeah, totally.
You fry these tomatoes down, you add a little sesame oil and oyster sauce, a little bit of soy sauce. I'm a white pepper fiend. Like, I love white pepper. I think it's kind of a love or hate thing, but growing up, I was white pepper in everything.
I love white pepper, yeah.
It makes me sneeze a lot, but I'm like, throw more in there. It doesn't even matter.
Sure, yeah.
But the tomatoes slow cook down into this really luxurious sauce. And then for me, again, this may either be out of efficiency or laziness or a little bit of both, because I do think that they go hand in hand. But I really just push my tomatoes to the side. They're not going to be runny or anything, but they're going to be really nice and jammy. I cook and scramble my eggs on the side of the pan. And then once they're about like 80% cooked through, that's when I mix everything in. And then I just go ahead and add a little bit more of that green onion razzle dazzle, and it's already a complete meal. It's so simple. And again, I think a lot of cultures do have their own version of like tomatoes and egg. It's kind of like the Chinese version of shakshuka, if you will. And this is something you could definitely pull together in no time.
Well, Cassie, it has been so fun talking with you. I am so happy to read this book. Congratulations to you, and I'll see you at Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much. See you at Thanksgiving.
Cassie Young is the author of Bad in the Kitch, and she left us with a recipe for 30-minute beef and broccoli. Find it at splendidtable.org. And that is our show for the week. Thank you for listening, and pick up a great book today. We'll talk to you next week. Our show is produced by APM, American Public Media, and was made this week by technical producer Jennifer Lupke, producer Maria Wortel, and managing producer Sally Swift. Lauren Humpert is our senior podcast production manager. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is APM, American Public Media.
Keep right, and then turn
Support
right.
comes from Gen Pro. a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity.
Turn right.
More information is available at genpro.com.
It's Maria Hinojosa, host
Keep
of
left.
Latino USA. We all love great stories, and great stories are what we pride ourselves in delivering to you every week. Latino USA presents a mix of reporting on culture and politics, diverse voices, and coverage of current and emerging issues, featuring stories from the heart, stories that will make you think and maybe even inspire you. Listen to Latino USA from PRX.
Sundays at 7 p.m. on News 88.7.
Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
I'm Christopher Kimball, and this is Milk Street Radio. There might be no better sign of autumn than a red delicious apple. They look great, but the taste can best be described as
coffee grinds in a leather glove.
Today we're ranking apples, and we're not holding back. Our apologies if you're a fan of the thick-skinned Macintosh.
In an emergency, the Macintosh apple could be hollowed out and used as a makeshift shelter appropriate for the harshest of Arctic storms.
No apple is safe from criticism, not even the historic Stamen wine sap.
Final score, 45 out of 100, horse food.
Definitive rankings of your favorite apples, that's coming up on Milk Street Radio from PRX after the news.
Turn right.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. The Trump administration says Hamas has accepted its plan to release Israeli hostages ahead of tonight's deadline imposed by President Trump. NPR's Luke Garrett reports talks continue on who will govern Gaza after the war.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says nothing is guaranteed, but he celebrated President Trump's peace plan. Here's Rubio on Fox News.
Hamas has accepted the entire construct of President Trump's proposal for releasing the hostages.
This plan has Hamas releasing all remaining 48 hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinians. Rubio says he is confident in this first phase, but the second portion, deciding who will govern Gaza after the war, that is still under negotiation.
We've got a general outlines of it, and which Hamas has generally accepted, though not entirely. Some of it is going to have to be discussed, moving back and forth.
In Trump's 20-point plan, Hamas has no role in governing Gaza, and it allows for a Palestinian state. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
The Pentagon is calling up at least 300 members of the Illinois National Guard into federal service. A memo seen by NPR says they'd be used to protect immigration and customs enforcement, the Federal Protective Service, and other federal employees. The deployment would last 60 days. It's expected to begin sometime this week. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says this is unnecessary and not a serious effort to protect safety. He said it's the ICE agents who are causing trouble in Chicago.
They're raiding neighborhoods where instead of going after the bad guys, they're just picking up people who are brown and black and then checking their credentials. Are you a U.S. citizen? I don't know about you, but I don't carry around papers that say I'm a U.S. citizen. So you can imagine people are getting detained, they're getting arrested, U.S. citizens.
He was interviewed on CNN. Federal workers and contractors at a town hall held by a Virginia Democratic congressman say their livelihoods have been disrupted by the federal shutdown, but they urge Democrats to continue it. From member station WAMU, Margaret Barthel reports.
Jason Moses is a 23-year Army veteran who has also served in federal civilian roles. His first shutdown came in 1995 when he was about to deploy on a peacekeeping mission to Bosnia. Now he's a federal contractor and says his paycheck may be affected if the shutdown continues for multiple weeks. He's usually frustrated by shutdowns, but says he supports this one.
I didn't raise my arm to protect the U.S. Constitution from all threats, foreign and domestic, to watch the U.S. Constitution be shredded by the current administration.
Dozens of attendees voiced agreement with him at the event. Suhas Subramaniam's district in the D.C. suburbs is home to more than 36,000 federal employees. For NPR News, I'm Margaret Barthel in Arlington, Virginia.
The government shutdown is now in its fifth day. This is NPR News. Steep discounts on college tuition are fueling skepticism about the value of higher education. From member station GBH in Boston, Kirk Carapezza reports a new study finds that families are confused about the real cost of college.
Tuition discounting is the practice private colleges have long used to manage revenue, cutting costs for some students while keeping a higher sticker price for others. Now the Strata Education Foundation reports public universities facing funding caps and enrollment declines are adopting the same approach. In the past decade, the share of undergrads at public four-year schools receiving aid rose from 49 to 62%. Average discount rates also jumped from 24 to 31%. The result? Families are left confused and skeptical about the real cost and value of college. For NPR News, I'm Kirk Carapezza in Boston.
Typhoon Matmo made landfall in China today with maximum sustained winds of 94 miles per hour. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced from their homes. Businesses are closed and air flights canceled. The airport in Vilnius, Lithuania reopened today after it was shut down last night by balloons. As many as 25 small hot air balloons entered Lithuanian airspace. Some of them were carrying smuggled cigarettes. Officials say they delayed flights for hours, affecting nearly 6,000 passengers. Europe has been on alert after drone sightings in recent weeks. I'm Nora Rahm, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public. This is NPR.
This is Mill Street Radio from PRX. I'm your host, Christopher Kimball. Is there such a thing as the perfect kitchen? Well, one model may have come close. It was called the Frankfurt Kitchen. It was designed in the 1920s in Germany. It was sleek, it was supremely functional, and they even chose a paint color, an unconventional blue, on purpose.
That's like the one unappetizing color, right? So imagine making this beautiful food and then it's in a blue kitchen. But the reason it's blue is because it was thought to repel flies.
That was Jennifer Comar Olivares, curator at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Later on in the show, we'll get a tour of the Frankfurt Kitchen. But first, it's time for a lesson in apples, the good, the bad, and the just plain inedible.
Macintosh, the national apple of Canada. This dense, curling stone has the refreshing tart kick of an icy northern winter. Unfortunately, this tumor-swollen reindeer nose has perhaps the thickest, most intractable skin of any apple this side of the prime meridian. Final score, 45 out of 100, horse food.
That's comedian and self-proclaimed appleist Brian Frangie. He joins us now. Brian, welcome to Milk Street.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You run a website called Apple Rankings. And so just to give our listeners the taste of your style, here's what you've written about the Lucy Glow apple. Quote, the Lucy Glow is a circus freak apple with yellow skin and a red interior that shocks skeptics into submission. And here's the good part. Most would expect this to taste like an unhealed surgical wound, since each bite resembles a freshly picked scab. So before we go any farther, I think this deserves some amount of explanation on your part, don't you think?
Well, yes. I mean, the Lucy Glow, I wanted to depict how freakish it looked because it tastes so good. The Lucy Glow apple, I rank 85 out of 100, which is excellent, even though it looks so insane.
The Opal apple, quote, while the outside may be stained with a toddler's accident, in an ironic twist, the interior of the apple does not brown for quite some time. You actually rated this 82 points in excellent.
Oh, yes. This is one of my favorite new apples. And I have to say, this is a controversial opinion, but I 100% believe yellow apples are greater than green apples.
Okay, so your rating system.
Yes.
You actually, despite the way you write about your apples, you do take this seriously.
Oh, 100%. I take my Apple ranking seriously. So I created the 100-point ranking system to give a definitive delineation for every single apple I had, so there'd be no question as to how I felt about a certain apple.
So let's back way up. I mean, the obvious question is why? Why are you obsessed with apples? I'm glad you are, because nobody else is willing to say what you say. But what was the motivation here?
Well, yes, I do appreciate the fact that you are recognizing me as a trailblazer, speaking truth to apples across the world. But I was just fed up with the apple selection that was available to me in grocery stores, particularly, obviously, the Red Delicious apple, which I call coffee grinds in a leather glove.
Yeah.
It is a 25 out of 100. It's a disgrace. And it's sad. It's really sad, because there was a time back in the turn of the century when the Red Delicious apple was considered the #1 apple.
So what's happened to apples? I mean, my take is that apple growers have really gotten into the super sweet, like in corn. They're less interesting. There's less apple flavor. I'm not happy with the Galas and the Fujis and the Cosmic Crisps, because they're just too sweet and they're not complex enough. Are you going to agree with me, or are we going to have a food fight?
I think we might have a little bit of a food fight, but I do think that the people who grow apples are following what the market demands. And up until I'd say the 80s, people cared more about locally grown apples that had a specific flavor and attitude towards their region. And then growers started to mass produce certain apples, and the #1 feature is how it looks. A beautiful, handsome apple that has a waxy glow is purchased more often than an old beat-up one that might actually taste better. The second thing is crispness. People want crispness. It's like taste has become an afterthought in the apple world, where it's like, okay, does it look good? Does it crisp? Then I don't care what it tastes like.
Well, I love making apple pies, and I have to say, if you make an apple pie with Max and Granny's, which is sort of a typical 50-50 deal, right? I mean, it's okay, because the Granny holds its shape. Although I have to say, I just want to, for the record, say, you cannot eat a Granny Smith out of hand. It is a vile, wretched, horrible flavor. It's not juicy. The skin is tough.
I have to warn you, because you are treading in dangerous territory. The Granny Smith apple has an incredible fandom rivaling the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. If you disparage the Granny Smith apple, you are inviting a torrent of hate, which I have experienced firsthand. People love the Granny Smith, and I don't understand it.
For eating out of hand?
Eating out of hand.
No.
Yeah, I don't even... People who bake it in pies, go ahead, bake. It's a great baking apple.
It's a great baking.
But a Granny Smith apple is thick-skinned, dense, and it makes your gums bleed. There have been studies showing that the Granny Smith's acidic profile will make your gums bleed if you eat too many of them.
You obviously are not scared of the torrent of hate, because you've now stirred it up.
I'm in it. I am deep.
So, to enumerate your criteria: taste, crispness, skin, flesh, juiciness, density, beauty, branding, consistency, and cost availability. What does branding mean? I don't quite understand that.
Branding has been incredibly important. Ever since the Pink Lady apple was trademarked, apple companies have been focused on making sure that their apples are proprietary. And now it's become a multi-million-dollar marketing industry. Like, for example, there's an apple out there that you've probably seen in stores. It's been around for a few years now, called the Rocket Apple. They're these little tiny apples that are pre-washed like an astronaut's prefab lunch and placed into a little bottle rocket container that you can open up and snack on without even washing it. Now, that is an incredible amount of marketing for an apple.
Now, what about if you got a Cosmic Crisp and you wanted to grow some and you took the seeds out of an apple? That would not produce a Cosmic Crisp, right?
No, that is the coolest apple fact that anyone will ever hear. Every single seed and every single apple will produce a brand new variety of apples. So if I took a seed out of a Granny Smith and planted it, a tree might grow that produces a red apple. Because basically every apple tree has been the equivalent of sleeping with the mailman. Or really every mailman in town, because every apple comes from a flower which is pollinated by a bee whose pollen packet comes from God knows where. So no seed will ever resemble the parent. It's a Maury episode every single time. But that's not even the cool fact. This is, if you can never get the same apple using seeds from that apple, then how do you get more of the same apple?
You graft.
Yes.
You take rootstock and graft on, right?
Yes. You have to clone it by cutting off a little branch or shoot and grafting it onto a living apple tree. In fact, you can graft multiple different apples to the same tree. So that means that every single Granny Smith or Macintosh or Pink Lady, whatever apple you eat today, came from the same exact tree as the first and only one that ever existed.
I never thought about that. Now, I've grown McCowans, and you say any flicker of a long-term relationship is quickly dashed as this actually quite disgusting dirtbag, jeez, turns into a mealy, tasteless flesh sack within days of being brought home. Yeah, but if you pick it fresh off the tree, it's pretty spectacular apple, I think.
Yes, it is, 100%. But you have to get it like the day it ripens on the tree. And just, if I'm ranking apples for the average consumer, they're going to get usually a mealy flesh sack that is not worthy of being eaten.
So what are a couple of apples you think most people can find that are to eat out of hand or probably make the grade?
Yeah, so, I mean, first thing I would say is if you're going after a Pink Lady, you like a sweet tart mix, a little more on the tart side, that's great. But don't be fooled by grocery stores who are selling you Crips Pink and telling you it's the same thing as a Pink Lady. It is not. The Crips Pink are the B team of Pink Lady apples. But, you know, you can never go wrong with the worldwide favorite available in every grocery store, the Honeycrisp. I mean, the Honeycrisp is a great apple. The downside of the Honeycrisp is that it can be a little expensive, especially because a lot of them are huge.
You know, this reminds me of a discussion I had recently in Italy about saltless bread, which goes back to the 15th century, and the Pope put a tax on salt, and everybody in Umbria decided to not put salt in bread. Saltless bread is vile. I'm sorry, it's just awful. But if you talk to people in Italy who grew up with it, they defend it to the very bitter end.
Yes.
But I finally realized that trying to explain why people should not like something they grew up with is really a fruitless exercise.
Yes, fruitless.
I mean, if you grew up with a Newtown Pippin or a McCowan, good luck telling people the Cosmic Crisp is on its way.
Right. I mean, that's why people love the Granny Smith so much. If you try to attack the Granny Smith apple, it is as if I am attacking a person's identity that they developed from childhood. You can't fight against people's emotions when it comes to apples and any type of food. But I'm trying to take the emotions out of the equation. I am making this a scientific, ranked, numbered system. There's no category for, did your grandma use it in a pie when you were at your happiest?
Brian, thank you for your worldwide tour of apples and especially for your writing, which makes all of this worthwhile. Brian, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
That was comedian Brian Frangie. You can read more of his Apple rankings at applerankings.com. Now it's time to answer your cooking questions with my co-host, Sarah Moulton. Sarah is, of course, the star of Sarah's Weeknight Meals on Public Television, also author of Home Cooking 101. Sarah, so here's my question. Are we going to get over French cooking? And by that, I'm not dismissing French cooking because I think it's fabulous. But do you think we're headed into an age when we finally cut the final bonds with culinary education and restaurants being rooted in that tradition? Or do you think that that will endure forever?
I think what you're referring to is that French cuisine was considered the reading, writing, and arithmetic to every other thing you did.
Right.
So all the rules, how to use a knife, all that sort of stuff. Well, let me just say this. We both know, we both agree, particularly with what you're doing with Milk Street, that every country has its own way to approach things, and they're all equally valid. I don't think French cuisine, listen, I love it. I think it's fantastic. There's a reason why it's been popular. I don't think it's going to continue to dominate. I think everybody's looking for new tastes, new excitement, new places to go, new toys to play with in the kitchen. So, no, I don't think it's going to continue to dominate. I still love it, though.
You know, I'll say two things. When I travel the world, so many times I ask people that question, and 90% of the time they said they were trained in a French restaurant.
Well,
which
is what has been.
But the problem with French cooking, it seems to me, is it's devoid of spices, it's devoid of chilies, it's devoid of fermented sauces. It has an ingredient list that's fairly finite, and therefore its cooking was appropriate for that. But if you go across the world, people have so many more tools to play with.
No,
so,
true.
but the techniques are still solid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a call.
Yep.
Welcome to Milk Street. Who's calling?
Hey, this is Tom Egan in Lambertville, New Jersey.
How can we help you?
So after our last chat about my baking problems with my well water...
You're the guy with the haunted well, right?
I am the guy with the haunted well.
Yeah, okay.
Fill us in a little more. What is it you're trying to make and having a hard time with?
Yeah, give us a recap.
Give us a recap.
The recap is that I've been baking for a number of years, but just in the last year moved to a new house, and it's the first time I'm baking with well water, particularly hard water, and so a water softener, so the water chemistry is very different than anything I've used when I've lived in a city with a municipal water supply.
Right.
Our first few bakes, we had very under-fermented dough. Based on our last conversation, I basically took the pouliche recipe that I usually use, which is 330 grams of flour, 330 grams of water, and then a pinch of yeast, right? And trying that with 3 different water sources. So because I was only baking 1 loaf of bread, I wanted to divide it into 3. So divided the flour by 3, I did 110 grams of the well water with the softener, the well water with the softener bypass, so the hard water, and then another one with bottled water.
And then turn left.
My findings were a little different than I expected them to be. The last thing I had to divide by 3 was my pinch of yeast. When I grabbed my pinch of yeast, I said, well, how the heck do I divide this by 3?
Right.
So I started doing a little more research on how much is really a pinch, right? Long story short, what I realized is, what I'm doing in my typical ferment is I'm grabbing a physical pinch of yeast from the jar of yeast, whereas that seems to be, by the measure of what a pinch is, seems to be pretty light.
It's a half teaspoon you should use, right? Something like that?
The most consistent answer I found was a 1/16 of a teaspoon is a pinch. When I basically used more yeast in each of these experiments, by the next morning, they all had risen the same.
Didn't we mention that as a possibility? Adding more yeast?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, when I do pouliche, I use, cup each water, flour, and I use half a teaspoon of yeast. That's obviously a lot more than a pinch, so that's what I'm used to. But let's get to the good part. So you had the water that was through the softener. Does that add salt to it?
It does, yeah. It adds sodium.
Okay. And then how did that do versus the hard versus the bottled water?
In my little experiment, they were all the same.
Oh.
And what I've realized since, when I've done my pre-ferment now, when I've done the pouliche, I got one of those goofy little sets that has little measures for a pinch, a dram, and whatever other old-timey measures are out there. And I've basically found that by using a little more, it ferments just fine now. So my suspicion is that at that very low amount, when I was using like a physical pinch, it's possible that the amount of sodium added to the
killed
water
the yeast
softener.
Right.
Yeah.
As you know, when you make bread, you leave the salt out in the first part because it'll retard the actual yeast. Yeah. I think that's...
Yep.
I don't know if that's true, but it sounds right to me, Sarah.
Yeah.
I mean, that does
that's
sound
a happy
good.
ending.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here listening. Yay.
Nice test.
One way or another, I got an answer, right?
I think the point is that he didn't need us.
You're giving me way too much credit here.
We got lots of credit to give. Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
This is Mill Street Radio. If you're stuck in the kitchen, give us a call anytime. The number is 855-426-9843. One more time, 855-426-9843. Or simply email us at questions@milkstreetradio.com. Welcome to Milk Street. Who's calling?
Roberta Holzer.
How can we help you?
My daughter and her fiance have asked me to make their wedding cake. It's a banana cake with a salted caramel filling and buttercream. So I figured I was doing a white chocolate cream cheese buttercream, and I just can't nail the salted caramel filling. The main thing is the consistency.
So the problem is the caramel is too thick or it's too loose?
Too thick.
When I do caramel, I just start with sugar and I put it in a skillet, a saucepan, no water. It'll start melting around the perimeter. With a heat-proof spatula, I start moving it in towards the center. I find that really works well because if I have a light-colored stainless steel 10 or 12-inch skillet, I can see the color, which is really hard to do in a saucepan sometimes. So that's how I do that. I get it up to the right color, off heat, add the cream slowly, and then you put it back on the heat because the cream will, the sugar will start to seize. But the question is, to what temperature do you cook that caramel? What did you cook it to, like 230, 225?
The first couple recipes that I was making it with a little bit of water and the sugar. Now the last one that I made used castor sugar, fine sugar.
It's just a fine sugar, yeah.
It's really, if you took regular sugar and put it in a food processor, you end up with castor sugar.
That one, the caramel came out perfect, but it's just too tight.
How do you know when it's done? Do you have a candy thermometer, instant read thermometer?
I eyeball it. So when this recipe, I put the sugar in the fry pan. They said a non-stick fry pan, which I've never ever done.
No, please don't do that.
No.
See, it actually worked.
Yeah, I know, but
that's toxic.
But you don't want to get that pan. If that pan gets over 500 degrees, it's not going to be good for you. So
Gotcha. Okay, but they said do it on a medium heat.
Yeah.
Leave the sugar undisturbed until it starts to melt into a dark caramel color. Swirl around like you were saying. Turn the heat down, and then add ice cold chopped up butter pieces. Then add the cream, and then they say golden syrup or corn syrup, and then a pinch of salt.
And then how do you know how long to cook it after you've added the cream and the salt?
The temperature is on low, and I'm just kind of mixing it around with the wooden spoon until everything is melted.
I think that's the problem. I mean, you're obviously a great baker, but when you get to caramel sauces, you got to have a thermometer because what's happening, I will bet you, is you're just either over or under cooking it. So if it's too loose, it's at 225 to 230. If it's too candy-like, it's over 235 to 240. What you want is 230 to 235, and you definitely want an instant read thermometer, and make sure you're...
Which I have.
Yeah, and just tip the skillet a little bit so you get the probe deep enough into the liquid. 230, 235, in that range.
Okay.
Sarah?
I agree with Chris 100%. I would take it to that dark color, take it off the heat, and I would just add cream. I don't understand the butter. You need the liquid that's in the cream, too. I would just go with 3 ingredients, and I agree with Chris about the temperature. After you add the cream and it seizes up and you whisk it and everything and you cook it a little more, then take its temperature again.
What I'm trying to get is a consistency like a spreadable consistency.
Yeah, but you got to let it cool. Yeah. I think Stella Parks, who's one of my favorites, who did Brave Tart, has a good caramel sauce recipe.
She's great.
And it's the 3 ingredients I just told you. And I've made that, and I've made others with just those 3 ingredients. And what happens when you cool it, it gets spreadable. It will be liquid to begin with. And again, if you want it to be liquid, like say you want to put it on ice cream, then you go and warm it up again. But if you want it to be spreadable, like in your banana cake, you just need it to come to room temperature or chill it a little bit.
Gotcha.
Roberta, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
All the best.
I appreciate your help.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
This is Milk Street Radio. Coming up, the history of kitchen design. That's up right after the break.
Hey Milk Street Radio listeners, for this year's holiday episode, Chris is taking calls with Vaughn Vreeland from New York Times Cooking all about holiday cookies. If you need inspiration, advice, or cookie making wisdom, Vaughn and Chris are here to help. Email us at questions@milkstreetradio.com. Again, please send your holiday cookie questions to questions@milkstreetradio.com and we'll be in touch.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Live Nation. Presenting Ludovico Einaudi, Italian pianist and composer for the Summer Portraits Tour, October 12th at Smart Financial Center. Tickets at livenation.com. Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research. More at stlukeshealth.org/cancer.
Hi, I'm John Donvan, host of Open to Debate, where we bring you open-minded discussions and debates about the issues affecting our lives. Everything from science and tech to politics, culture, and foreign policy. In our divided nation, we feel it's more important than ever for people to be open-minded, open to disagreement, and open to listening to the other side. Join me in being open to debate.
Sunday night at 10 p.m. on News 88.7.
This is Mill Street Radio. I'm your host, Christopher Kimball. So let's talk about kitchens. You know, they're hardly ever designed with a cook in mind. An efficient kitchen should offer solutions for common cooking problems, like the step-saving kitchen introduced in 1949.
To the left of the mixing counter is the vegetable preparation and dishwashing center. With knife rack and utensil cupboard at the right, vegetables in front of her, and sink at the left, this worker has a step-saving setup for preparing vegetables.
That's a clip from a U.S. Department of Agriculture ad for their step-saving kitchen. The mid-century was a big era for kitchen innovation, but it turns out some of the first functional kitchens were actually designed in Germany back in the 1920s. We're joined now by Katie Thornton to share the story of the Frankfurt kitchen, which she originally reported for the 99% Invisible podcast earlier this year. Katie, welcome to Milk Street.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
So, before we get into all the details of this Frankfurt kitchen, let's back up and talk about the German kitchens of the late 1800s. So, what did a middle-class kitchen actually look like at that time?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I think in order to understand how the Frankfurt kitchen comes around, we really need to understand kind of what it was a response to. And in truth, we don't know very much about kitchens before the World War I era. You know, kitchens, they were sort of hodgepodges of whatever surfaces you could slap together in a room. It was often a big open fire or possibly a wood stove, a big wash basin that you would have to haul into the room to sort of wash dishes, possibly also do laundry. It was kind of just another room in the house where all of this really unpleasant work happened. And all of this, of course, is not really a coincidence. You know, at this time, kitchens were primarily the domain of women and of laborers, household laborers, and so they did not receive much attention from architects and designers.
So let's get to the inventor who finally did pay attention. Who was she?
Margarete Schulte-Lahatzky was an Austrian architect. She designed the Frankfurt kitchen, largely considered the first modern kitchen. She had worked on some public housing projects in Austria when she was in her 20s, and in her late 20s, she was called by Ernst May, who was in charge of what was called the New Frankfurt. It was a large municipal project after World War I that was intended to get people housed and get them housed quickly. And so she was tapped to come over to Germany and spearhead the design of the kitchen. And her whole idea was that if she wanted to work to advance women's equality, women needed to be able to get their housework done as quickly as possible and move on with their lives. And so what she did is she designed motion studies, and she ended up laying out the design of the kitchen such that every movement was as streamlined as possible.
So let's talk about some specifics. I mean, let's be honest, it was a very small kitchen, at least the one model I've seen pictures of. So no matter how you designed it, you weren't taking a lot of steps to get from one part to the other.
That's true.
But there's some really cool things here. The cook box, which is sort of like a crock pot, but you could use it to keep food warm, but you could also use it to actually cook food very slowly, right?
Yeah, exactly. To slow cook grains, to slow cook meats. You know, a lot of the Frankfurt kitchens used electronic appliances. And that was was quite a new phenomenon at the time, it was also quite expensive. And so there were all of these little sort of design techniques that were used to save on the cost of electricity. So if you were to use your stovetop to cook, an item in the short term, you could use the residual heat in the cook box to slow cook meats or to slow cook grains that you could then have for later. There's another element of electricity saving design that I thought was really interesting. If you look at the top of the Frankfurt kitchen on the ceiling, there is almost like a track light, and the single light bulb could be moved throughout the kitchen. And so it enabled you to have your one light bulb do a lot of work for you.
And the measuring cups, 12 identical cups and spouts that fit into cubby holes in the wall. I love this, each labeled with the name of a different ingredient.
Yeah, rather than having a large bag or a large bin of flour on the ground that a woman working in the kitchen would have to then lift up out of this, presumably low storage place where it would be susceptible to mice and other things like that. It had, a squared off storage bin for different grains and different foodstuffs that also had notches within the unit itself to show you how much you have poured out. So all of a sudden, you go from having a bag and a measuring cup and a secondary bowl and all of this sort of back-breaking work to pulling one storage bin out of the wall in front of you and just pouring the contents into your single bowl.
Yeah, it was two things about it. It was beautiful.
Turn left.
I mean,
it is.
It reminded me of the old post office little boxes with the windows.
Yes, exactly.
And the other thing is, I said, why don't we do that now? I mean, that was what a great idea. I mean, I have to go find my rye flour, my whole wheat flour, and my cornstarch and everything else. They're all in different bags in different places. And, that's the story of history, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back.
Right. It's so funny. I mean, the Frankfurt kitchen in many ways is both sort of revolutionary and at this point very mundane, because so many of its components really were so seminal that they became quite normalized. But there are some things that I would absolutely love to have in my IKEA kitchen, which is very much a descendant of the Frankfurt kitchen.
And then this is a nice little Jetsons touch. There's a button on the floor that closes the pocket door.
There are so many little Jetsons features. One of the other ones that I really wish we still had, in addition to those 12 identical cubby storage containers / measuring cups, was there's a chute into the countertop. First of all, I should just say, the entire idea of a single height, long, continuous countertop was really revolutionary at this time.
Right.
But within that countertop, near the sink, there's a gap, a small hole, where you can slide your food scraps in. And on just below the surface of the counter is this small rectangular box. You can pull it out from underneath the counter and just pour your food scraps directly in the trash.
So what eventually happens to her and what happens to this Frankfurt kitchen? Did the innovations she came up with stick around? Did it influence future kitchen designs? What happened?
Yeah, so it did absolutely influence kitchen design in the next generation. But the Frankfurt kitchen itself was only produced from 1926 until 1930. This was interwar Germany. And as the Nazi Party gained power throughout the late 1920s, they ended up cutting a lot of the public housing initiatives across Germany. And Margarete Schulte-Lahotzky ended up leaving Germany with Ernst May, who was the planner and architect in charge of the new Frankfurt initiative, the broader municipal project, along with her husband, who was also an architect, and I believe 14 or 15 other architects and urban planners. They ended up fleeing to the Soviet Union. So in many ways, she was not necessarily given accolades early on as the designer of this very, very influential kitchen. But her designs and her concepts of saving space within the housing unit very, very much lived on. And you see echoes throughout Europe and throughout the US. There were a lot of different kitchen designs that were really sort of premised on this idea of making life easier for the woman who was in the kitchen.
So she moves to Russia, but then what? Does she spend, the whole rest of her life there?
No, she has a very very interesting trajectory. So she moved to the Soviet Union in 1930, and she ended up working there. The sort of record of her work is a little bit ambiguous in this period, but it seems like she and her husband, Wilhelm Schutte, helped design collective kitchens in the Soviet Union, and she was also designing nurseries. So other things that were sort of at this point, crudely seen as the women's realm. Her and her husband ended up leaving there in 1937, and in 1938 they moved to Istanbul, and ultimately she joins the clandestine Communist Party, and she works with this anti-fascist resistance cell. And so she's sent on a mission to Vienna, and she ends up being captured. And, this is back to her home country of Austria, where she's from. And she ends up being captured and imprisoned in various prisons and labor camps in Austria and Germany for 4 years. She's in solitary confinement for a lot of that time. And finally, she is freed by American soldiers in 1945. And a few years after that, she does return back to her home in Austria.
So what happened after the war?
Yeah, so after the war, there was still deep anti-Semitism among many Austrian citizens and leaders. And so she was not necessarily warmly received when she came back. She was somebody who had worked resisting the Nazis, while she was overseas. She also maintained allegiance to the Communist Party of Austria for the rest of her life. And then especially against the backdrop of the 1950s and the Cold War, she was really sort of shut out from work. So even though she had all of this experience with public housing and kitchen design and also designs for children and children's well-being, she only got 2 contracts from the city of Vienna after she returned back. And so she ends up doing a lot of her work in private homes and doing big public projects in China and in Cuba and in the Soviet Union.
Well, it's just a great example of knowing history is so important, because you look back and think, oh, the 1920s, somebody sat down and really thought about how to design a kitchen. And most of that has been lost, I would love to work in that kitchen.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. At the time, there wasn't very many models for efficiency. And so she looked to ships and she looked to train cars to figure out how to maximize space in the kitchen. And I think that's really telling of her motivations.
Katie, thank you. A fascinating story about the Frankfurt kitchen and what we have forgotten since 1926. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for talking with me.
That was reporter Katie Thornton. You can hear more of her reporting on the 99% Invisible episode, The Frankfurt Kitchen. Have you ever noticed that industrial design just keeps getting worse? Back in the 60s, designers knew the dials were the best and easiest way to tune a car radio, maybe adjust your stovetop burner, or even use the thermostat in your house. Today, you need a PhD just to set your oven. And please don't get me started on dishwashers. Why are there so many options? And why don't they have a little green light to tell you if it has been run or not? You have to be a kitchen detective to suss out whether the dishes are clean or still dirty. So let's face facts. There was a time post-World War I when designers really did understand kitchens. A chair to sit at a low counter, overhead lighting that moved on a track, a cook box for slow all-day cooking, wall storage for grains and flours with built-in measuring cups, and even a button on the floor to close the closet door. So please, let's be honest.
Go straight on.
It really is game over. I'm Christopher Kimball, and you're listening to Milk Street Radio. Now let's head into the kitchen with Lynn Clark to talk about this week's recipe, Indian spiced smashed potatoes. Lynn, how are you?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. I visited London and Paris a few months ago.
Fine.
And one of the stories I was after was Indian cooking in London, especially the way it's been adapted, which is really interesting. But I went to Dishoom. It's a series of really wonderful restaurants in London. And I met with our head of R&D, former head chef Rishi Anand. And
then
on the menu for lunch were gunpowder potatoes, which are potatoes which he essentially
Exit left.
grills and then serves with gunpowder spices, a mix of spices and some fresh juice and herbs. It was delicious, and it was delicious because it was something simple with a great spice mix. It was just transformative.
Yeah, this is a kind of a classic Milk Street recipe, right? It's what we do here. We take something that seems familiar or is simple, like potatoes, right? And give you ways to enhance it or make it much more interesting and exciting. In this case, we're gonna actually smash our potatoes. So we're gonna add a lot of textural elements here. I think Chef Anand grills his potatoes whole, then splits them open and kind of roughs them up, doesn't fully smash them. We fully smash our potatoes, and then we toss them with spiced butter. And that's where that gunpowder name comes from. It's a spice blend, and there's all different variations on this spice blend. I think Chef Anand's version is from the Parsi cuisine, which is Persian Indian. So there's whole cumin, coriander, and fennel seeds that are coarsely ground. 2 different types of masala, garam masala and chaat masala, which are spice blends in themselves. And then chili powder and fenugreek. And all of that gets tossed with these potatoes. So that's a lot of spices. So we found we wanted to kind of pare that down a little bit to highlight our favorite flavors. And that was the cumin, coriander, and fennel, and that fenugreek. And if you can find the fenugreek, I really, really recommend it. It adds a really distinctive, almost maple flavor to the potatoes. Really, really different, and kind of adds something just kind of truly unique here.
It's interesting how all of a sudden, spices that you weren't familiar with now sort of become part of the repertoire. And the last thing I'd say is also that coarsely ground spices, the difference between powdered ground spices and whole or cracked spices. It does make a huge difference in flavor. And also the feel in your mouth is just great.
Right, exactly. I mean, you've got so many textures here. We've smashed the potatoes, so you've got creamy and crispy parts of the potato. You've got heat from some jalapeno, and then you've got some crunch from these coarsely ground spices. All of these spices get bloomed in some melted butter to really enhance their flavor, and then that butter spreads all over the potato, so you're getting all of that spice flavor all over the potato. We add in a little bit of fresh scallions and cilantro for some herbal elements. And then I think at Dishoom, it was served with the classic raita, Indian condiment with yogurt and cucumber. If you don't want to do that, you can just squeeze a little bit of lime juice over the top. It really adds a nice kind of tangy balance to the earthy spices. Just a really nicely balanced dish.
So something simple, something new, gunpowder potatoes or Indian spice smashed potatoes. Part of my regular repertoire. Lynn, thank you.
You're welcome. You can get the recipe for Indian spiced smashed potatoes at milkstreetradio.com.
This is Milk Street Radio. After the break, Adam Gopnik experiences culinary alchemy. That's coming right up.
Hey listeners, this year for Thanksgiving, we want to hear all about your most unusual traditions. Your antics, games, rituals, and unexpected foods that you think no one else is making. To share your Thanksgiving story, please leave us a voicemail at 617-249-3167 or send a voice memo to radiotips@177milkstreet.com.
Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TVA, it's a night of new drama premieres, starting with Brian and Maggie at 7. Then Masterpiece presents Mack R at 8, followed by The Gold with Hugh Bonneville at 9. Tonight on TV8 or stream on the PBS app.
Republicans and Democrats are trying to make the best of a federal shutdown. The GOP sees an opportunity to place the blame on Democrats and to further their party's agenda, while Democrats see a chance to reshape their image as effective opposition to President Trump. I'm David Green. Hope you'll join Moa Lathy, Mike Dupke, and me for the next Left, Right, and Center.
Left, Right, and Center, Sundays at 5 p.m. on News 88.7.
I'm Christopher Kimball, and you're listening to Milk Street Radio. Now it's time for some culinary wisdom from one of our listeners.
Hi, it's Dave from Alexandria, Virginia. On a recent episode of Milk Street Radio, I heard a question about how to keep pizza from sticking to a pizza peel. Chris suggested using semolina flour to lubricate the peel. My trick, which eliminates the mess of semolina flour in my oven, is to use parchment paper. I form the pizza right on the parchment, then transfer the pizza and parchment to the baking steel using my peel. After about 2 minutes, the bottom of the pizza is set and releases easily from the parchment. Then immediately slide the pizza back onto the steel while holding onto the paper. The pizza slides right off and finishes cooking perfectly since it's now on the steel and there's no semolina mess.
By the way, if you'd like to share your own cooking tip right here on Milk Street Radio, please go to 177milkstreet.com/radio tips. You're listening to Milk Street Radio. Now let's hear the latest from our friend, Adam Gopnik. Adam, how are you?
I am very well, Christopher. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm particularly well, I should tell you, because I am finally back cooking in my kitchen, and I have been away from it for more than a month, which is about the longest break in cooking that I think I've had in 25 years. And so coming back to the kitchen after being away from it, I took a kind of new registry, took stock in a new way of what it is we love about cooking. And do you know what it is more than anything else, Christopher?
Oh boy, I could come up with 20 or 30 things. I would say it's the joy of using your hands to do something useful. That would be my very Vermontese version.
That's a beautiful one. Actually, and of course, it's profoundly true. One of the things we love about cooking, especially if we do mind work all day, as writers are condemned to, is exactly that our attention shifts from our heads to our hands at 6 p.m. But the thing that struck me when I went back to my kitchen was the pleasure of transformation. Just the way things changed in your pan